this vintage, I think is a surprise vintage, because this vintage to play in elegance, finesse, is no totally with a good power, a structure. But I think nowadays it is a perfect to drink the classic version. For example, Pier Rosso, I think I need a little bit more inside the bottle. But for talking about this vintage, was characterized by a very rainy spring until the middle of June. July and August has been not too hot. The perfect climate. At the end of the August, at the first 2 weeks of September, the temperature range between night and day was amazing. And for this reason, I think this vintage have a good aromas, a good flower, have a elegant tannins, with tannins very hard, with a lot of potential. But I think inside the bottle will be an elegant and great wine. I think the 2018, the vintage that we release in 2 months, I think is like an old vintage, the old Brunello'S. That yes, in the last years we tasted the old vintage, the climate change. Yes, of course. But I think when we have this vintage in the past, it was normal, because the harvest started in the end of September, October, and this vintage we finished the harvest at the 10 October. But it's not like every year, because normally we start the harvest at the middle of September and we finish at the end of September. So this vintage 2018, I think, is like an old vintage, and for this reason I think in the future give us a lot of satisfaction.
The 2018 vintage was probably, I would say, the last cool vintage. Actually, it's a vintage that I quite like, because it's a more classic style vintage, considering that in the last years probably we experienced many more warm vintages, and I think Sangiovese actually does not like too much warm vintages. It uses its character of freshness, of elegance, of finesse. Sometimes in warm vintages, Sangiovese gets very, in a way, heavy, powerful, high structure, which actually I don't love in Sangiovese, because what I really appreciate about Sangiovese is the elegance, freshness, finesse. And I think in 2018, at least here at San Polo, we experienced a very Sangiovese-like vintage. It was cool, it was quite rainy, but just during spring. Then summer was, I would say, balanced. I think 2018 vintage has been, considering how Montalcino is various, it can change quite a bit. I was at Benvenuto Brunello last week. I was tasting, of course, lots of Brunello's, because I wanted to see how all the other producers and all the other wines behave in 2018. And what I found out is a bit of variation, depending on where the estate is, you can find really quite different characteristics. So probably this is one of the key factors about 2018, the difference between the different locations. We actually didn't have any bad weather during harvest, and it was actually one of the probably I would say easiest harvests in the last years for us, because we started harvesting around 22nd, 23rd of September, and we could keep harvesting without interrupting for bad weather or for anything. So actually, it was one of the, I would say, easiest harvest times in the last vintages that we have experienced. But the season was not that easy, actually, especially in the spring. There was quite some rain, so we had to work quite a bit. especially on the canopy, trying to avoid too much humidity. Of course, we are farming organically, so we need to take a lot of care of these kind of aspects. So spring was not that easy, but then as the vintage and as the season was going on, it got easier and easier. And then we didn't know actually what to expect, because we didn't know if we could have enough concentration in the clusters and then in the wines. And so we were afraid that it could be a kind of thin vintage, no?
Did you have to drop any fruit in the vintage?
Yes, every year we thin a bit the production, because another of the things that Sangiovese doesn't like at all is when you overproduce, because you lose immediately concentration, you lose immediately quality. So you always have to take care of how many grapes you have. And actually in that year, the bud fertility was quite high. So we had to thin quite a bit the production to have a nice balance.
For me, yesterday I was looking at our also data from our meteo file, and was for sure a mild summer, but for me is not negative, because it means that the vineyards never stop to mature. You know, sometimes when in August it's very hot, the vineyards, to protect themselves, they do like 1 week or 10 days where they stand by, and there is no maturation. And when they start again, as soon as the night temperature, they come back. To have a mild summer means that even if the autumn was rainy, and so we were not able to push the maturation up to October, the vineyards was working even in August, but usually don't work if it's too hot. So I find that the maturity of a grape is very good because of that. And then and as I was remember, actually in September we had 3 main rain. That was the first day of September. Then after 15 days, after 1 week, there was the second rain, and the big rain was just in the middle of September. So then after the middle of September, we had like almost 10 days of good weather. With a good maturity, with a good phenolic maturity, and we were acting like cleaning the vineyards from the leaves. We were able to bring very healthy grapes with a great maturity at the end of September, when we actually have harvest. But the key of the unicity, I think, of 18 was the very low temperature during the night. Because if you have let's say a humid or a rainy month and it's hot, it's really hard to control the mold and the problems that you can have, especially with the fog in the morning. But if you have the rain and you have cold wind from the north, and we experienced temperature in September that were close to 10 degrees, 9 degrees. I mean, that has been the secret, I think, of the unicity. And also in the 90s, again, I was not working there, but from the story that I hear, there was much more temperature change between the day and the night. And this is what I think has been preserving the grapes, first against the mold or the problem that you can have with the fog and humidity, but also the flavors. So again, for me, testing the 18, I find more the soil, less the fruit, and so remind me like the 95 or 96 that I've tested, that there were vintage where you really were filling the Tuscany soil. And after 10 years or 15 years, if you drink them now, they perform better than a 97, even if a 97 was considered more famous. Or on Brunello, something more close to now could be the 2013 similar. So less structure, but if you open now a bottle of Brunello 2013, is performing as well as a 2010, in my opinion. Clearly, it depends from the producer, but again, I think that a very mild climate like we had in 2018 has been giving to the wine the best expression of the soil. I think that 2018 is also a vintage where you can really see how the producer work on the vineyards, how many passages they do, how much they invest on doing the treatments. Don't get me wrong, but in 2015 or 16 it was difficult to do a bad wine. I mean, you have to do something bad in the cellar to ruin what the nature has been giving to you. 18 is something where you see more the agricultural side of a wine. Because today, I think we have the study, we have the technology, we have the knowledge that you can work very well on vintage like that and take the best that vintage can give it to you. Clearly, at 2002, no, there is no way for me to do an exceptional wine because I was raining every 3 days. So there is no way to make a wine with a standard of quality that we want in a Brunello di Montalcino, or we hope in a Brunello di Montalcino. But 2018 really reflect what the human and the winery can do to manage the grapes.
For Casanova di Neri, we are happy. It's a very balanced vintage. Bouquet, tannins, acidity, very persistent. It's not so rich and powerful, but I love, for example, Tenuta Nuova 18. Very, very quality of tannins and quantity good and persistent acidity is very close for me to 13. And for us, for Casanova di Neri, the 18 it is a big news. There is the new single vineyard, the Giovanni Neri. That is another single vineyard from Casanova di Neri. And the first vintage, the same. Very balanced, extremely persistent, soft, but in the palate, the tannins go everywhere. Really, really, really good. The harvest has been for Tenuta Nuova and Giovanni Neri was in the end of September. For Cerretalto, half of in White Label, beginning in the first 2 weeks of October. The quality of the tannins in 18 is very high. No big quantity of tannins, but great quality of tannins. I believe it is the secret of Casanova di Neri wine. Also in the vintage where the weather is not so good, we can produce good quality. The same in 11 or 9 or 13 or 12. Really.
Interestingly enough, 2018 was one of those vintages that I had to really go back to, look at weather reports, try and get it in my mind, what was going on, because it wasn't like a 2017, which was so huge because it was the first of the hot years that you felt this isn't a joke anymore. You know, this is a system. Whereas before, maybe you could say, oh, well, it was hot in 1899 when my grandfather did such and such. It was a really hot year. It was one of those years that wasn't like that. We were on to serious stuff and it was real. And So 2018, I was thinking about it and the word interlude came to my head. It was a sort of interlude between these colossal heat waves that I guess we won't be calling them heat waves anymore. I guess heat waves will be talking about stuff that's up in the 40s. So from now on. So, but it was absurdly what we would call a cooler year. But if you look at it in the past, it wasn't really cooler. That's what years were meant to be, I suppose. So, so what was going on in the vineyard was pretty typical to what it should have been had things, you know, were we not in this cycle of, you know, well, call it what it by its name, climate emergency. And so what I'll tell you, as far as I remember, and I've been looking back over our notes, it started out, you know, it was pretty typical in the beginning of the year, and then there was a damp May, beginning of May, and then, but we were, you know, in the beginning of the year, because it was quite typical, and it was quite mild actually in the winter, but then it got cold in February. So we prune in February, March, and that's perfect to prune when it's cold, and I mean not too cold, but cold. And so we got the pruning done on time before the spring began, and we do a late pruning because we want to have and you know encourage the vines to put out their foliage late, and it's also in case there's a frost later on in the spring, so we're always doing work for prevention. And then the summer came in, and it was damp in May, but June was sunny, so we didn't, and quite dry, and we didn't, and for us that's how we experienced it, so we didn't have too many problems of mildew. And August was not particularly hot. It rained towards the end of August, but then there was dry, warm weather in September, which allowed us right at the end of September to bring in a healthy harvest. Now, it was pretty, it's like, you know, those students at school who they don't make trouble, they're just quiet, they get on with their own thing, and they don't make a song and dance about anything. And you kind of forget their names when you're older. But then you find them and they're doing the most extraordinary things. Well, it was a bit like that for the 2018.